Okay, let's go ahead and start rolling here. So looks like we got Edward, Aaron, Robert, Tessa, and myself.
Daniels is going to be here shortly.
Okay. Uh, all right, so the last 2 weeks we've been working on trying to finish up the MVP. And from what I've seen, I think the only agenda that was not completed was Gary's, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then he was working on.
He has
I'm sorry, what?
he was working on two agendas. That water, air, and submarines. Then
Oh, he set it as a. Oh yeah.
yeah,
You haven't been able to get a hold of him yet, so that's why it's still on eval, right?
yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's see here. So I think as long as the rest of this is looking good, you said that Aaron's camera thing was good to go.
Yeah, it seems to me that it's finished and we can
Okay.
close now.
Okay. So I think that pretty much concludes the programming aspect of this. I think we could probably shut it down as far as that goes. The 3D stuff where you've been stuck on animation, the 2D stuff, the images that we do have is enough to get us past the hump. So I think at this point, unless anybody has an objection, I think the MVP is probably done. All right, I'm gonna take that as a no. So, so let's talk, which is good because we've been on this forever. So the next thing is going to be vertical slice. Now, vertical slice, we're going to more focus on the core aspect of gameplay. So units attacking, building, things like that. And then the way that I have this laid out right now, let's take a look at the boards. Is we have vertical slice, beta release, alpha release, production. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4 before we actually release it to the public to actually play. So on this one here, I want to focus on basically getting the gameplay to where we want it to be, to where the units move and build. We have our hierarchy of units that just like any normal RTS. I think we'll wait for the officers until probably beta to start doing that because I think we need to have the building blocks of the units being able to do what they would normally do, and then we'll stack the officer concept on top of it. If that makes sense to everybody.
Yeah.
As of right now, there is no vertical slice stuff. This is just a copy of the other one of the
MVP.
yeah. So I need to come in here and modify this, which I've been meaning to do, but just trying to get the animation thing set up before we move forward. Because without the game animation, we're kind of spinning our wheels here. So it's a hurdle that I think as a team we need to figure out and get it over with. We're going to have our guest today come talk to us. I just messaged him the link. So when he gets here, let's kind of cover, since that's the hurdle right now, let's go ahead and jump into that. We can start piecemealing vertical slice together. And Edward, I'm probably gonna ask for a meeting with you sometime this week, and you and I can kind of work this out and get it situated.
Yeah.
So just from that standpoint, I would say start looking at RTSs and see what we don't have for core game features you know, like the backhoe should build units, you know, when you the starting game conditions, things like that that we need to set up, and then we'll also need those prefabs with inside of Unity once the unit's made, and then obviously the script that goes with it. Now we have the building scripts, some of those started, but obviously we need to look at those and determine, you know, what other aspects of that script or scripts needs to be modified to be more like an RTS type uh, game. So we'll leave that alone for now, but that's something I want you to start rattling around. So when we have a meeting, we can kind of cut through it. So let's talk animation here. So what I got on here is these 10 questions here, a little bit of background. So when the gentleman joins, John, I believe is his name, when he joins, we will, I want to give him a little bit of background of what we're trying to achieve. I've hit on it kind of briefly, and I've given him some things to look at, but I want to make sure that we're all on the same page before we dive into the models and what we're doing. And then once I kind of give a good overview and give him a rundown of the kind of the questions that I have and the one that Daniel posted there, and any of these others on here, then I want to turn it over to you, Aaron, and have you maybe demonstrate kind of what, you know, just a very broad overview of what you showed me yesterday. I don't think we need to get into it a whole lot because he is an animator.
Yeah.
So you won't have to explain, you know, the little details of it, like me.
Well, I will say my computer crashed like 3 hours ago, and I thought it was done, but I managed to revive it, so I have no idea how it's going to operate today.
If that's the case, I do have the animation jet and the tank pulled up. I can give you control of my computer, I think. I can give you control of my computer and we can do it that way. I've got enough, this computer's got enough horsepower not to lag. So, that's, Discord is hijacking the blender. So, and we can come in here to wireframes and kind of explain to him,
Oh,
know,
yeah.
what you're talking about from this aspect. Do what?
Is that same model I was showing you?
Yeah, this is the one from the website.
Okay.
And then if you look at the jet, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It is animated with bones though.
Okay.
I'll play. I don't know if anybody who hasn't seen the animation to this. Play it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet, actually.
There it goes. I don't know how much that you guys can see with the screen or with the screen share, but
Yeah, I can see it.
okay. So that looks, to me, this is what I would think the animation should be, is bones and you know, keyframes and all that. So we can get into that with him.
Was that done with shape keys? Or did he just stretch the mesh out?
I think the meshes were stretched out.
Okay.
If you get into the website, you can download it.
You'll have to do that.
I think it's if you click 3D. There we go. Right here. I'll post this in the chat for you. Okay. So we can do it that way too, just to kind of keep everybody on the same page. So let's go down and then flip this. So I think at this point. I think we're probably ready for him. Do you guys have any other questions or anything that we need to discuss? I know we've been talking a lot in the chat, so.
I don't know. I was thinking about bringing this up because I'm kind of unsure. I know that Unity, when you put a model in there, it changes everything into tries anyway. But I just wanted to clarify maybe that, like if you have a model that's like mixed, say it's got like quads and n-gons, if it acts normal in Unity, as long as you're not like deforming the mesh or how that goes. So I've never had issues with it. I just want to make sure before we go down that road.
Okay, so I'll post this link. Will you put that question here? Which is this form? I want to make sure we get everything that, we're basically doing a Q&A, guys. So if you have anything, I don't care how simple or whatever, now's the time to ask it. So we'll go ahead and put that there. And then what was I going to do? Oh, yeah. So let's see, do we have an animation wiki? Yeah, so it looks like this was created for animation.
That's for the agenda that Aaron's on right now.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's why the name is the same as the agenda, so maybe don't delete that yet.
Okay. All right, well, I just wanted to make sure that we actually had one to place all this information that we're going to be talking about today. So if everybody would take notes on whatever interest you have in this, and then we're going to create this wiki just like we did with the standard modeling wiki. Is it under design? I'm not sure. I'm not sure where it got put. I may do a search for it. Okay, so here is the standard modeling. Yeah, it is under 3D. Okay, I thought it was. There's a standard modeling for I think this is non-voxel.
All right, I got it posted.
Okay. Let me. So any non-animation stuff I want to put in here, like creating those seams and stuff like that we need to be able to rotate that turret, and anything else on a animation or anything else on a model that obviously we need to break up, because if we have two roles, sorry, tongue twister. Since we broke out game animation, then we're going to have to make sure that the modeling that's done in 3D and then the animator, obviously there's going to be things that the animator is going to have done prior to animating it, which I know making the, like splitting out the turret, making it a sub item of the tank or whatever, whatever else we have. So we're probably going to want to revisit this wiki here and then that other wiki. Okay. Okay, it looks like he got our message, so he will be joining right at 9. Does anybody have any other plans other than this today?
No, I don't think so.
I'm gonna go grab one of the kids and take them in the go-kart and drive them over to this garage sale later.
Bet that'll be fun.
So
Wasn't Jonathan supposed to join?
yeah, he was supposed to. I haven't seen him, so I don't know if maybe he passed out.
Yeah, my assumption was he fell asleep because he stopped answering messages. I didn't read through all of them, so I mean.
Oh, I know. You guys were on it last night. I woke up, it said 175 messages. I was like, holy.
Was it really that many?
Yeah, at least for me.
Well, hey, we settled the tank track thing. I got that figured out. And what it allowed is the method I found out was we can actually we can use curves from Blender or any other animation engine, I guess, with the same method. We can actually use those in Unity now.
Oh, so that's not an issue?
No.
Awesome.
Well, then that's good to know. So then let me put in my thing here. So
I mean, he may have something different to say about it, but I did find a working method, so.
that doesn't make us have to program a whole lot to make it work.
No, not at all.
Okay. So we're good with curves, bones, and texture animation, right?
Yeah.
Now, is there any animation that we can't use that you know of still? Physics?
Physics from Blender, I don't know about that. I haven't attempted it. Like the physics system and the particle system, as far as I know, you cannot, because the way I got the curves to work is I baked all that data onto bones, and
Okay.
we're all in armature. So it's a very weird thing to figure out, but you may be able to do that with possibly the physics. The particle system, probably not, because it generates particles. So
Yeah, and Unity has its own particle thing, so.
So luckily, the one thing we can't do, we can at least make up for in Unity. So
yeah. Can you order some pens and pencils or something? Like I think I'm stealing my own pens and taking them away. I don't know. Oh, we already have some. All right. So we got 8 minutes to go. That's okay. Well, that's good news.
yeah, I was really excited about it. 2 days later,
Yeah, we all got to figure it out. I tell
it
you.
took me like 5 months to do that. It's always how that works.
It's all right. I think as programmers, we all know the struggle.
Yeah.
10 minutes of code, 3 days worth of work.
Yeah. They can be the opposite too sometimes.
Oh, yeah. I really like the way this tank looks.
Yeah.
We need to start kind of figuring out the storyline more now, too, I think. Because we basically don't have anything in it. I want to keep with the animation stuff.
Hey, go into material on that tank real quick.
Hold on one second. Okay. All right.
Why aren't there any materials showing?
Because I didn't import them.
Oh, okay.
I just grabbed the model. That was it.
Okay, because when I did it, there was like in Unity, I think there's like 2 materials assigned,
Mm-hmm.
but it's I can't remember how it was. It's like the bottom half and the top half, I think. But it didn't have the coloration from the site, and I was kind of scratching my head why that is.
Yeah.
Did it just not import into Unity?
Yeah. I don't have it on my desktop. I pulled it off my desktop. No textures. But with the storyboard thing, though, I think we probably ought to start coming up with some stuff with that. Which is going to be mainly a 2D art and writer thing. But I think with our vertical slice, we're probably going to need some of that. So we should probably start having meetings with that. So the idea of the storyboard is that while the game is loading or doing anything that takes a little bit of time, that we show the story. Just like little screenshots of it. So it'll be like a comic book, but I want the application to know what page of the comic book you're on, and then on the next time that you load into a game, it just shows the next page or the next chapter of that story.
Yeah. Sounds cool.
But it needs to stay relevant. If you just lost a battle, we don't want it to pop up and say, now that you won.
Yeah. That would
It's got to have an option for both.
Yeah, we're gonna have to figure out something for that. It may be a little tricky, but that's kind of the concept of it.
We can just have a stat variable of some sort and like just have like a simple AI, if this and that,
Yeah, and we could do something like that. The storyline itself, we're probably gonna have to hash that out a little bit more. I think maybe we should start with like a campaign, like a storyline campaign, because I mean we have kind of the history and stuff, but like what is happening right now, And I think we try to immerse the player into obviously into their character set for the commander or the person that they are controlling.
Yeah.
Because when you first start the game out, you won't have every unit in the game, so and your rank will be really low. So the concept is that as the story progresses, that your rank and the amount of units you control and things like that go up, and then the amount of officers you have that you have to deal with will continue to expand as the game goes on. That's when when you're playing multiplayer games. We also have a unit total. That way, veteran players can actually play with the new players. It just it basically gives them a handicap by allowing the total units to be fair between the two people.
It looks like John's with us now.
Oh, hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
All right, good.
Okay, so we've been sitting here chatting. Let's just jump on into it here for a little bit of Q&A. So did you have a chance to look over the form?
I did. If you want to begin with the first questions, we'll do this in the order you all set up since you have it on the screen.
Okay, awesome. So I'd like to give you a little bit of background just to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Excellent.
So on the RTS front, we're doing, like I said here, we're doing like a Command and Conquer RTS with water. That's art style is like that 8-bit army link that I gave you. And then we also have something we call officers, which allows AI to control the RTS. That's feature a little later on that we're going to be kind of moving into to try to help micromanage RTS games.
All right.
And then I think that's, I mean, in a like a one sentence phrase, that's pretty much it. And what we're having trouble with is figuring out what the best way to animate things are, because like this image here, these tanks, you know, obviously we'd want like the tracks to rotate, the guns to turn, and the turret to turn. So you got multiple, you know, on some of these you have more than one thing. And obviously like a tank, if you rotate the left side, you know, and hold the right side down, or make the right side not move as much, the tank, you know, you'll see the actual tank turn. And that's kind of the level of detail we want in animation. And then also we'll have destruction. Like this image here was a scene that we rendered. And you know, we want destruction in it too, to where if your tank takes too much damage, or your jet, or any unit in the game that takes damage, we want the animation and the textures to kind of reflect that. So like a tank that is like almost dead would probably have like its track blown off, still sitting there firing but not moving because its track's blown off, type situation. So we're trying to get the models to where we can build upon them. Start off simple to where, you know, we just have the turret turn, we have the tracks move, and then build into that later on down the road.
All right.
We've tried recreating the models multiple times, and I'll show you the latest one we got here. This is our tank here, and if you can kind of see here, the program that we were using was Voxel to do this, and we have way too many polygons and vertices on this for what we think is necessary. Because if you look at the art style, I mean, it's pretty simple.
There are two levels to that. First of all, the thing to remember is all models have to be cut down to triangles. So no matter how you look at it, that top big flat area, go back to the model again. Okay, that top big flat area looks like it'd be very simple, but basically anytime there's a cut along the edges of it, there's going to be triangles cutting across it. Now, there's a few ways to do it. There's a few other things to keep in mind too. Did you see those weird, what do you call them, non-squared angles that are throughout the entire thing? The ones going lengthwise through an area.
Yeah.
Those are bad. Just long story short, normally what you want is, if you want the model to light, what you're dealing with is the following areas. The model not only has to look correctly when flat shaded, it has to deal with light and light wrapping around the edges, even on the flat edges. This means that if you're looking at that currently highlighted section, instead of the, what would you call that? Those long lines going across that top section through the middle of it, you would actually want it to have a square area directly above the lower shaft, so that it doesn't have those long lines. Now, there'll still be triangular lines when you export that go through the middle of every square. But those, generally what you don't want to have is a whole bunch of long lines right next to each other fanning out. You don't want fanning lines. If that term makes sense, what I'm showing you here.
Okay.
Anytime you have one point with a half dozen lines coming out of it fanning across the object, that's bad, because lighting will catch onto that and you will get weird artifacting in that area due to lighting hitting.
Like an in-gone circle?
Yes. Anytime the n-gon circle is made, it has a tendency to take one point on the edge and then draw to every point around it. Those are bad.
Okay.
It would be better to have one point in the middle and have them all come to it. It's one extra point, but there's the trade-off is well worth it. That's all there is to it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter the area is flat. It'll still show up as artifacting depending on what shaders, materials, and lighting you use.
So generally you want quads instead of n-gons?
In It's an oversimplification, but yes, in this case, you want everything to be squared up, not triangularized. Although, again, I'm telling you, when you export this out to Unity, every polygon, every squared polygon, will become 2 triangles.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
you want to keep things as square as possible. It will save you a lot of trouble down through the line. Now, that means looking, for example, look at the top of the thing again, that flat top surface of the top section.
This one.
Yeah, select the top. Okay. Can you turn on a solid for a moment? It's very hard to get a... And just to let you know, the hotkey for that Z, you can jump back and forth on that. So generally, that big flat area right beneath the, what would we call that? The cap on top there. I'm afraid I don't remember my tank terminology.
The turret.
No, okay, top of the turret. That area right there, underneath the hatches. Okay. Now, that area right there, you're going to want to have squared up. So first things first, what you do is you square up the left and right edges, and you would just have it anywhere there's a cut, have that cut go all the way across to the other side. Hopefully it's symmetrical. With something like this, it might as well be because it saves you polygons in the long term. But wherever there's a cut, just cut through the entire thing and have it basically, I wish I could, is there any way for me to control this for a second?
Yeah. Let me see here.
I could have sworn I saw something about it, but
You should have control of it now.
I do. Nope.
It says waiting for John to control your screen. You got like a message saying,
Okay, give me a second. No, we'll just click on that message. Maybe that'll. Nope. It's got to be around here somewhere, but I do not know where it is.
oh, you got it.
Oh, good. Okay. All right. You do have a backup of this file, right?
Yes.
I'm not going to save, but I want to make sure.
No, you can. This is actually a backup of it that I just saved off.
Excellent. Never hand me your original files. Actually, never hand anyone your original files. Okay. This is kind of hard to see through the video outlay, and it has a lot of lag. Okay, looking at this, can you follow my cursor?
Yeah.
Okay. You would want to cut from here all the way over to there. You'd want this one to cut all the way over to the other side. Reshaping it in this way would get basically rid of this entire surface, for example. In fact, let me do this. Switch over here. You would not believe how hard it is to use this when you have temporal lag. I swear it has become absolutely nightmarish. I've been using this stuff for years, and it feels like a whole different software. I have to slow down as I reach the edges just in case I fall off. All right, we're going to just clean out a section of this to give a sample what I'm talking about. All right. Did you all change the hotkeys on this version of Blender?
No. Nope. It's all standard default. Yeah, it may not. The remote control may not. What's the control key?
Just hit X.
Nothing.
Okay, it is not default. Give me a moment here. Hit the delete key then.
No.
I've never had to do this from a menu. Give me. I'm not getting any response back. I can't get the thing to.
Let me see. Hold on a minute.
I've lost all control.
Yeah, it's because I'm moving it. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I can click now. I've got the mouse control, but it's not doing nothing.
I don't know. Hold on. Let me.
Okay,
see.
that's working now. Go down to mesh down there.
Where at?
Go down to mesh. Right there, yeah. Is there a just choose faces. All right. Now, hopefully,
No, that.
I can.
Yeah, that hollowed it out.
Yeah, I just grabbed that. Now I can grab this and this, and we've cut that down to that much there. So just a simple process. To do this, we would also have to take. I'm glad now my hotkeys are working because F works. Okay, so I can extrude this way. Let me see here. Is it X? No. How about Y? Is it Y? Y is a good one. And I'm eyeballing this there. And then I select here and here. And notice right there, we would be getting rid of that little square there normally. And leaving a face there. And we just do this across the entire thing. Create a few new faces across anywhere. For example, that one's just going to get loaded into one single face. You do this across the entire thing, and you get much cleaner loadouts. Now, two things to keep in mind. These are important. When you do flat shading, in other words, you make it to where this is, for example, we smooth it across this section, but anywhere there's a 90-degree angle, we set up the model so that it's hard shaded and does a hard turn on lighting across there. Anytime you do that, when you export that out to Unity, Unity deals with that in a very specific way. Any hard transitions between surfaces, a hard transition being an angle as opposed to a smooth, what it does to do that in the Unity engine is during import, it separates those faces out. This literally would become its own mesh up here, while this side here would be its own mesh, this would be its own mesh, this would be its own mesh. They're all a part of the same mesh, but what it means is it doubles up the vertices in those corners so that this piece is technically separate from this piece. This does not normally interfere with your animations or anything else, but it's useful to know if you ever do mesh level editing of the models to understand how it does that. So that is the method it uses to do it. This means the lighting, since they're separated at this point and they're technically only just touching, they're not a part of each other, the lighting can't roll across it. And that's how it does that trick inside of Unity. So let's go over that. Okay, so that's the simple way, but I mean, there's no, I'd like to say there's a fast way to do it. You can use decimate. One of the things we can do here is take decimate. Give me a moment. Let me undo what I did and see how well that. Have you tried the decimate thing on this?
The modifier?
Yeah.
No, I haven't done that to the tank.
Give me 1 second. Come on. All right, that's all the surface. So this model piece right here is in there. I'm going to. Okay, let me out finally. We're going to go ahead and load on this. The decimate has a specific set of functions to deal with this. All right. One of them is to make planar. We choose it by the angle limits, and then we make it to where it's visible. And we look at it like this, and I can't tell. That may be working. We'll find out. All right. Is there a unit here where we can see it? Nope, I guess we'll just have to apply it. And then go back in. Oh, there we go.
That looks a lot cleaner.
It is a lot cleaner. It has a few errors and sections where it will break. Every time you will have to do manual cleanup afterwards. The other problem is, of course, you're going to have to be careful with it because some of the breakages may not show up until you import it all the way to Unity. But just think about how much time you saved with this initial one. Any cleanup is almost going to have to be shorter than that. When you start getting into the rest of the tank section, let me see here. This may work out really nice for you, but again, it's terribly sorry for the terminology. It's a crapshoot each time you want to do it. But you always want to use the planar version, especially since all of your models are at that, and have it to where 5 degrees, the default's good. So we apply it. Oh, wait. You can't be in edit while you do that. And now we go back in and take a look there. Now, you'll notice a few things here. See what it did? It made the whole thing one big plane. That means you're going to get fanning out when this comes out. But editing this after the fact is a lot easier than trying to do it through manual systems, because you can always cut these up. Use a knife tool between points, things like that, and make it a lot easier on yourself. But overall, that should give you a start. All right. I think that gave you the first part there. What else were you wanting to know?
Okay, excellent. So let's come back to here. So let me go ahead and just jump into a question that kind of pertains to this too. So when we're animating, obviously we have to have sub items. So like the turret here is a sub item of the tank here. Is there anything special we have to worry about when connecting two items together? So like another example is we have a soldier, a foot soldier, and we have a RPG rocket launcher right now, but they're not.
Let me ask you a series of questions, because I get the idea of what you're asking. This is a classic question. Let me go over just a few quick questions. The one I want to know, first of all, do any of these items have to be interchangeable, or is every object unto itself? In other words, is the rockets, is this tank ever going to swap out tops, wheels, pieces, or is it always one unique item with all of these pieces a part of it?
Well, that kind of leads into the next question, which would be easier, because we have like let's take the infantry. The infantry will switch out weapons.
Okay.
But we can also model it to where we just switch out the model itself with a different weapon, if that makes sense. So we're trying to figure out which way to go with that.
Okay, let me give you the pros and cons of this in bullet format. First one, it is always better to have any specific character have as much of the mesh be unified. This means not separated into parts as possible. It is cheaper to use bones to animate that than it is over a period of time, or normally to have multiple parts. The reason for this is each part rendering takes up resources in the system on its own layer. They've got ways to deal with this, including such things as having, I believe the newer versions of Unity now have the ability to replicate one object multiple times in the scene, but even that has limitations because they tend to work as a semi-group the way they're built. So here's the thing, if you have individual units, it is always better to have the tank be one mesh controlled with bones than it is to have the tank be totally separate meshes that are just stacked on top of each other.
Okay.
This is especially true based on unit multiplication. You're dealing in real-time strategy. Let me emphasize this. We're not talking about a minor number here. If you have 100 units on the screen, you're talking every time you have multiple parts for the units, multiplying it by how many parts you have. So that 100 units suddenly becomes 500 objects.
Yep, that makes sense.
This is massively costly in your system, especially with rendering. Physics don't like it neither. Let's get right down to that. There are ways to get around that. If you have to do it, good. With models this simple and with as low resolution textures as this, you may be better off just building variants of each model or using texture differences in order to denote a lot of the differences. change its skin as opposed to the other. It may also be a good idea if you have upgrades onto a unit where the unit suddenly gets a missile rack on top. Have that as a separate object and just attach it once it becomes available. This means all the lower level units won't be worrying about it, and you only have the increased cost on the upper level unit. Even then, if they're going to have 100 of these missile rack tanks, you're probably better off having both units separately and switching them out as they upgrade.
Okay.
That way they're whole. It's going to be a trade-off between how many dynamic options are you going to have for the unit to where it's just implausible to have 50 tanks for every possible combination versus the rendering cost. And it may be taken out of your hands if you find out the rendering cost is too high. You may have to have 50 variants of the tank just to achieve your goal.
Okay.
So it's a hard limit based on your technology and the processing power. Another thing to make sure you understand, you need a crappy computer for testing.
Yeah.
I mean, you need your low-end crap model computer that you want this thing to run on for testing. No amount of emulation will get you what you need. A video card or a computer with no 3D card and nothing but an Intel chip in it to do all the graphics processing.
Yeah.
It will at least tell you where you stand as you're building this thing. And
Yeah,
test on it often.
we've already established a testing ground for that. We've got I think it's a Celeron processor upstairs that has like a 512 chip in it for graphics. So,
and just as a side note, always do testing, if at all possible, on an actual compiled version for the final. The Unity editor is faster in some ways and slower in others, and will drastically change out what your frame rates and other things are. I also advise a package somebody built on the Unity store called SR Debugger.
SR Debugger.
It basically gives you the console and information, especially if you turn on debugging in your compiled projects.
Mm-hmm.
It'll tell you the line number of the error on an iPhone.
Oh, nice.
Desktop iPhone, it basically gives you console controls. It takes a little while to get used to. Once you do, you will never give it up. It is pretty much, I consider it a mandatory tool for Unity.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, well let's go ahead and move on here.
Go ahead.
So let's see, is there anything special about a unit or versus a mechanical unit when you're modeling? And keep in mind, everything that we're modeling will be animated. So
that's fine. You say unit versus mechanical unit. That means nothing to me. What are you talking about?
I'm sorry, infantry unit versus a mechanical unit.
No,
okay.
There's nothing. The style of animation and how you're going to have to model those characters are going to be different. But here's a good example. You have this tank here with those angled treads. There's nothing wrong with those angled treads, but you're going to have to think really hard about how that's going to animate those treads moving. My advice would be for a lot of it is to change out where the right angle is. A good example. Is my cursor still in here, or are you controlling it again? You can't see my cursor on here, can you?
Go ahead and try it.
Okay, you see my cursor?
Yeah, I can see.
Okay. Instead of having this to where it is effectively like it is, you make an alternate version of this or something to where the squares change. And instead of animating sliding between it, you make it so that how to explain this? Invert this point to be here and this point to be here. And do that all the way up and down the line. This straight area, okay, do you see this series of right angles here?
Yeah.
This is a line. I'm basically saying reverse.
Yeah.
Give me a second, the cursor stopped. Okay, it reversed this block to where it's effectively down here, this block down here, this block down here, this block down here, this block down here. Do the same thing over here and change, reverse those L-shaped angles here so that they do it. And do that and have it alternate back and forth as it's moving, along with, hopefully, a texture slide along this, which means that you UV map this track to where this let me see if I can show you. UV map this so that this becomes one continuous line all the way around the track, and slide. Actually, no, you're doing this 8-bit. Don't slide it. Change it by block length and have it alternate back and forth, and make sure that every length is, or every length of this much width on the texture is half a track. So the reason why you do this is this way, this piece right here will turn into its mirror image up here, and then the mirror image here, mirror image here, mirror image here, mirror image here, mirror image here. Am I making sense here, or what I'm saying? Okay.
Like Mario, like pixel art, like that. Kind of like a conveyor.
Yeah, conveyor, but it moves by each 8-bit increment, or 1 bit in this case. I don't know the resolution of these pieces are going to be. But the idea is that you're building the illusion of animation. Now, when you use a alternating texture trick to do movement, you have an advantage and a disadvantage. It means that no matter which direction it's moving, it looks like it's turning in the correct direction. Because since it's alternating back and forth, it will be using the same animation for forward and backwards. The only thing you'll need to do is tie in a little bit of code for the UV mapping of this piece right here, and possibly the side, depending on if it's just a single texture all the way here, and this is the only part that looks like it changes.
Yeah.
The idea would be that these parts right here would also spin backwards, but that's a little tougher to do. Due to the nature of how you've got it hooked up here. Now, this part right here, what you'll need to do is have something to control the UV. Now, there's a few ways to do it. If you have this as one unified mesh, it is possible to grab all of the points on the UV map layout inside of Unity and code it to grab that UV layout and shift it in a direction along the texture. So instead of moving the texture along it, you effectively are using code that grabs those and moves them along the texture. If you have a lot of objects,
While you're talking about the points and the vertices, go ahead and grab one of those corners real quick, because this is what voxel does to these models.
Not a corner.
Yeah, grab one and pull it.
Pull it down.
Yeah. Well, if you want to fix that, that's easy. You just grab everything like this.
Mm-hmm.
Go to W, and you can say remove doubles. Now here's the problem. It'll remove doubles everywhere where they're overlapping vertices. Now, why is that a problem? Let me give it, well, here, let me go ahead and do it.
Move your face.
Now, first of all, do you see that little effect there? Remember what I told you?
Yep.
It's got smoothing on it now, and it is all mucked up.
It doesn't have enough geometry, does it?
Well, no, it's not the factor it needs more geometry, but one of the things you'll need to do is to go in here and, let me see, do I have this? Flat. There, we flat shaded it again. Now that we've flat shaded it, every one of these surfaces will be cut when it gets over to Unity. Because did you actually see where I did that?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have the shading here. You want this model to be almost always in flat shade technology. So let's go over here. Can I find one of these where I've mucked it up doing this trick? Let me look at points here. Do I have a point here? Yeah, okay, let's see. What did I grab? Nope, it didn't overlap that one, but it's going to have done it over here. Okay. See that?
Yeah.
That is a misgrabbed point. You just, no, that's just a bad thing. So before you remove those out, what you have to do is you need to grab each individual part, like all the surfaces of this piece, and separate it out from the rest of the model.
So let's look at something here, guys. If you see how much repair work we're having to do with this versus for using a voxel, right?
Yeah.
So in my opinion, if we have to do all of this to rework a voxel animation, is it worth using voxel and just not modeling it into Blender and just skipping voxel?
It is absolutely worth it as a design model. If you like the way voxel works, convert them over, and then just retop it. You know what retopology is, right?
Nope.
You treat it like any high-end model. Now, you all are, of course, familiar with ZBrush.
Yes.
Okay, ZBrush makes some of the most beautiful high-resolution models that are absolutely useless for gaming you've ever seen. These are beautiful works of sculpture that have details in the millions of triangles. The only way to get them in is to then take those and retopologize them. Retopologizing is taking a mesh and then rebuilding the final mesh basically over the top of it. One that is lower polygon, has proper creases in all the areas, and has all of the rough detail.
Is that a 3D term that you're using?
Yes, retopology. Retopology. It is an actual. This is an actual word in the industry. You'll find it. So you'll be able to Google that one for a lot more information. But in this case, you don't even have to do that. All you've got to do is, with a model this simple, the easiest way to do it is to just grab pieces off the side, do what I did on top, and delete them off and do a cleanup on it. You can also, I mean, a good example here is I've got this little thing right here. I want the, wow, it is really hard to use this through here. Give me a second. Wow. I have to hold the cursor and click so carefully. One of the key things about Blender is it was made to be used two-handed, one hand on the keyboard and one hand on the mouse. And its primary benefit, aside from being free, is that it is what you call a fast production software. It allows you to work incredibly fast. So I have a tendency to sort of blur through this stuff very quickly, and this is making me actually think about what I'm doing. So I'm going to suffer from the centipede's dilemma awfully hard here. All right, so we duplicate, we move it out, and you now have this piece right here. You grab the sections off, the panels off each time. Now, a few things also to keep in mind. This is going to be real-time strategy, right?
Yes.
You're only going to be looking at it from the top?
Camera is 3D all the way around. Rotates, tilts, everything. You'll see the entire thing.
Well, here's a trick for you. If they can only see this from upper angles and they can't do this, get rid of all this crap unless you need it for a particular thing. Don't bother with the bottom. Don't bother with anything that's below the arc of visibility.
Yeah, well, the idea is to blow them up and throw them up in the air on some occasions. So
okay, well
tip
then
them over.
There is nothing wrong with that. Although keep in mind, if they come apart when you do that, if they're all one mesh, you're just going to have to build another mesh for the parts anyway. You can still reduce your poly count by doing that, and then have the full model. So break them into pieces. Keep in mind, it also depends on how you want them broken into pieces. For example, if you want each voxel block to be able to come off of this thing, first of all, it's possible, but your voxel levels are kind of high for that. Honestly, the best way I can think of to do that would be to put a particle emitter inside of this thing that tries to grab colors from it, and then throwing off a whole bunch of spinning cube sprites that take on colors of the various sections, and then have it go in different directions that way.
Yeah, and that's probably a good idea to do.
It's all a trade-off, but like I said, retopologizing it. The trick here is, do you like the way your voxel creator makes it look? If you like that, then yes, you should build that and have it as your prototype to build with. You should just then build over it. This means that you don't have to redo it. You have an art design that's consistent. Yes. Otherwise, you have to then design every one of these tanks. That's going to eat up that time you're looking to save drastically. So if you've already got a pipeline and you're happy with that pipeline and the way it looks, that's more important, because art design is a massive cost when you get right down to it.
Yes, it is.
All right. Go ahead and ask the next question or ask for clarification. Whoa. Okay, I'm getting my cursor up there.
Yeah, hold on. I'm
I
trying
was
to
fighting with you.
regain control. Okay. Oh, I still don't. What in the world? I still don't have control.
I don't know how to turn it back over to you, so.
That's.
I mean, you have the cursor, but
Yeah, it's not letting me control anything now. That's weird.
it's nice that it gives you control, but it seems buggy as crud.
Yeah, it does.
Go to another window and try controlling it, see if that works, and then come back to Blender.
Yeah,
Blender has a very unique interface, the way it connects with the system, so that could be causing your problem. Oh, you got it back.
It looks like I'm locked into Blender somehow.
Try Alt-Tab.
Nope. Okay.
I didn't do this.
Yeah, let me just kill Blender here. There we go. All right, so next question.
Please do.
Let's see here.
Sorry about how long some of these answers are taking, but this is a deep rabbit hole.
Yeah, and that's fine. It's what we need you for, so we can have clarification of what we're doing. So let's go ahead and go with this one here. Do mesh with mixed geometry, quads and knives, for example, operating poorly in Unity under any circumstance?
It's a false question. You never have quads or n-gons. You always have triangles. Anytime you import anything into Unity, it becomes a triangle. Always.
Well, the conversion process is more what I'm curious about.
Well, that would
both. Would it interact differently in Unity?
Of course it will, because you don't know what the triangles are going to be shaped like until the automatic system exports it. If you don't have it being triangles the way you want it to be triangles, if you don't have the quad, if you make it n-gon, you're basically rolling dice as to how it's going to look when it comes out. That simple. Right. So is it going to be, does it have a performance problem? No, not at all. What it has is it has a pipeline problem, because effectively you're taking what you get when you use them. There's no reason you can't use them while designing the model, but before export, you probably want to, break that up into chunks that are more traditionally polygon based, because at least with a polygon, you know that those squares are going to be broken into equally sized triangles, or at least semi-equally. With an n-gon, you have no idea where those lines are going to be cut at. So n-gons are great when you're designing, but before final export, you want to chop that up a bit.
Okay, does that answer that one?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So last one on the list would be from Daniel. Can you use hierarchy positions instead of bones once there is a single bone in the main object? If so, is that an effective way to animate non-deforming mesh in gaming, or something to stay away from?
All right, hierarchy. Hierarchy in Blender doesn't quite fully equate out to the same in Unity, but the great thing is once you get the model into Unity, you can stack the parts any way you like. So you can do that. You can have parts that are stacked as opposed to using bones, even in a bone-like mesh. The thing is, what you need to do is build a consistent pipeline between the two so that you know what you're going to have to do each time. Otherwise, you're going to be fiddling around a lot more with it. My advice, again, comes from the factor of combining all the meshes into one big mesh means that that's no longer an issue because they're all part of it, and you use bones for every part. A good example of how Unity thinks. I needed to animate out something called a sphere. It was a user interface that's one giant sphere filled with 1,000 cubes, and they slide up and down the surface of the sphere and rotate around it from left to right. The problem is Unity can't do that. It's impossible. 1,000 spheres in real time sliding mathematically along the surface of a sphere, it dies horrifically. That's on a desktop, let alone if you try and put it on an iPhone. So I did what I always do. I lie through my teeth. In fact, any game designer should know that once they get used to it, that their job is a professional liar. It's not about what you're actually doing, it's about what you portray you're doing. I separated out each of the lines of cubes that are on the sphere down into 24, what do you call them, rows down the surface of the sphere vertically. And each one of those had 48 cubes as a part of it. And then I used bones to move those 48 cubes. So they were able to be individually moved by bones, but were all one mesh. This means I only had 24, 25 meshes on the screen at one time, and Unity suddenly came able to deal with it. It looks just like it's 1,000 individual cubes, because for the user, that's what it is. But what I did was I just made 24 meshes or characters that look like that moving along the sphere. That kept in mind, it doesn't matter how you do it as long as you're doing it so that Unity can achieve its goals without dying, and it looks like what you're trying to do to the end user. Once you have that in your head and you can keep it there, you're going to be able to achieve some amazing looks with anything you make, because you stop thinking about the end result. You have to build it the way that end result would be done in real life. My advice, keep everything one mesh, use bones. Bones are cheaper than individual meshes. This is a oversimplification, and I'm lying to you because there's cases where that isn't true. But in almost all cases, and with the type of game you're trying to build, it is true in 99.9%. So that's my advice. This does make it hard to trade out, but keep in mind, you're dealing with low polygon, and almost all of your costs are going to be the cost of the mesh. The mesh is a voxel mesh, which means it has we're talking about a few kilobytes of information. The textures will work on it no matter how many meshes you have, because you can make one UV map texture, and you can have each of these parts use it off that texture. You just have one texture with it and all of its accessories as a part of it for that one tank. You just don't have the meshes. You just aren't using those parts of the texture for the parts that, or for the tank versions that don't have it. So this means you can get to reuse the texture, which is your probably largest resource cost. And all you're doing is using a few kilobytes of different tank models, each using that exact same texture. Yeah. Because they're all using the same texture, they can all use the same material. And if they're all using the same material and the same texture, even if they're different models, they can all be rendered as the same render pass inside of Unity, cutting down the number of render passes, which are what chew up your graphics resources. So the more objects you can have using the same render pass, the more efficient your not pipeline, but your render path goes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we've kind of determined what we were going to use for the palettes for voxel, and then putting them on the tanks. We've already gone over all that.
Okay.
So let's move on to something else here.
Please do.
Dang, there's a question I was going to ask you here. There we go. Will you take a look at this animation here? You still have control of my my PC.
Do I?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's get this thing. Do I?
Yeah. I see you moving it.
I got control, but I can't get this window to open up.
Oh, let me
Okay.
see. Let me see here. Oh, there you go.
Oh, there we go. There we go. Can I expand this to be full screen? There we go. All right. So you're wanting me to see this. All right. Give me a moment. I get this to. There we go. All right. Let's look at those.
This is just an afterburner jet, basically. Going from cruising to afterburner. This is our first attempt at animation, so.
Well, I mean, it's an animation. You have one bone at the front that the system is attached to. Are all of these, is this an actual, are these pieces just attached to the bone? Take a look here. No, okay, that's there. So these would always be a part of it as a part of the special effect on it. Hello?
Yes.
Okay. So those are separate pieces there. All right, let's go over a couple of animation techniques. I would advise each of these getting their own bones, making them a part of the mesh. And the trick would be this. Anytime you don't want them out back there and you want to have the ability to turn them off, here's the cheat I normally use. These do not take up a lot of polygons. They're just not that complex an object. Take those and have them shrink down to microscopic size and slam into the body between one frame and the next.
Okay.
So that is the easiest way to hide them and keep them in the body. These things are almost always going to be up when they're flying, and the only time they're not going to be there is when they're landed on a strip.
Mm-hmm.
And my entire thought is, well, players are never going to have these things landed as strip. The cost of having those always being rendered inside the model, even though they're not visible, is going to be negligible for what you're dealing with. So do it that way, because then you don't have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. How many other render passes are in here? This means as a part of this jet's texture, you want to have the cloud effect behind it, or whatever color it is built into it. I'm betting you probably have at least a little bit of space. I mean, it's going to be what, white? So it's not like it's going to need a lot of specialized lighting, and it's not even going to need a separate shader, because in voxel games, we don't tend to have clouds looking any different than the ground. It's not like, they all tend to look very similar to each other in terms of, because they're all flat shaded. Heck, half of them aren't even being shaded to be lit by anything but a single light. So that's my initial advice on it. And a couple of tricks here when you're working with this. When you're working with bones, one of the things you can do is, give me a second here. Oh, game object. You can go down here and say render as a wire. That way you can see what you're doing, but still see the bones, and select them. And that'll allow you to have a better control over what you're dealing with, being able to see those bones and how they're connected to each other. Basically, you're overriding how they're rendered in the entire scene.
Okay.
Let me think here. Do you want clarification on anything? Is there more depth you want in any particular part of that?
At this point, no. Probably be once we have everybody review the videos, and we can kind of go from there. So we only have 14 minutes left, and I'd like to kind of go over in depth when you should use certain types of animations. So the ones that we have that we can use is curves, bones, and textures. The ones that we have that we cannot use in Unity is physics and particles, because Unity takes care of that. So out of the ones that we can use, can you kind of go over when and why you should use one animation method versus the other?
Okay, you should. There are several things you can do with animation, and here's the funny part. You can use physics from Blender and put those into Unity. And the reason why you can do that is because technically, every movement of every object in a Blender scene can be output and can have the information fed into Unity, and it will try to animate them based on it, even without bones. So you could have an entire physics-based model of, let's say, a set of train tracks, if we want to go with the Valve software demo, and then have it where it animates the physics of that thing falling apart using whatever methods inside the more complex Blender physics engine. And then you can output that. That would possibly be a combination of bones, just objects falling individually using physics, things like that. And then what you can do is it'll just output all of the positions, all of the data of each individual position into Unity. and those animations will take place, even without bones. How well will that? Well, first of all, you have to use more traditional. You have to use the old legacy animation import, I believe, for that to work. Is that a good idea?
I was gonna say I got a question about that because I personally like legacy more than using Mecanum and all that.
Mm-hmm.
For legacy, they advise in Unity not to build new projects with it.
That's because they're going to eventually remove it out with the new versions, and if you need to update.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can
That's
make a
what
long story on this. They're going to yank it. It will happen eventually. The question is going to be, can you continue to use the old version of Unity to output applications? Yes, until you can't. Good example, if you're trying to put this onto an iPhone, you will find older versions of Unity will no longer be able to output because they will no longer produce an Xcode project that's recognizable by Apple. When that happens, you either update to the latest version of Unity or a version that can do so, or you cannot produce for the iPhone anymore and make new rendered copies of the application.
So in our vision of the game, then to us, we should probably use Mechanic and not even go down that rabbit hole.
That is absolutely true. Keep in mind that rabbit hole is on multiple layers inside of Unity. Eventually, you will have to do a rework on something that you've used in this because it will depreciate. The fact is, this is going to be years down the line if you're using the latest version of Unity because I think they're sort of reasonable. They have like a 5-year turnaround before they normally yank a particular feature. So it's not like they're going to do it tomorrow. I've worked with engines where they did things like that all the time, and it was just the most god-awful thing you've ever had to deal with.
Yeah.
So my advice is use version 2018 of Unity. Latest version. Deal with the bugs. Understand you're going to be updating it to correct some of the bugs you're going to run into. Try and work on the stuff that doesn't have the bugs and set up and prepare for workarounds for the bugs that are in it. Normally, I'd say use a year ago's, but you're trying to build a whole new game, and you pretty much want to have your basis be in the most recent version. Maybe go back 1 point release as opposed to going back to 2017. So do that.
We're on the latest version, so that's not a big deal.
Okay. I still have copies of Unity 5.6.5 because it's still not. Most people aren't wanting to update their latest version until they've been properly had a few games released under it.
Yep.
But based on that, my advice is always to use the Mechanim system. Also, for the last 9 minutes, in fact, I'll give you a couple extra minutes if you have that time here. I'm going to talk to you about Mechanim because the description you guys gave of Mechanim makes me worry that you're not fully understanding of what it does. Maybe it was just a miswrite on it. The key thing about Mechanim is it's not an animation toolkit. It's a mixer board. You still have to feed animations and data into it for it to do anything. Its entire purpose is like an audio mixer board for audio. You've got but you have to have all the instruments and the singer to feed into it. So you need animations. Those animations are fed into Mechanim, and what Mechanim allows you to do is to combine these in interesting ways. A good example, I don't know, can I share my screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Give me a second here. Okay, go ahead and try to share yours. You'll see a green box arrow at the bottom of your screen, I think.
Maybe. Give me a
Says
second
share.
here. We'll just share the entire screen. Okay, can you see this? Got an image of me here?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
Okay, there we go.
All right. Long story short, what you do is you can feed in a whole series of animations into this. Now, I do not have one prepared because I sign NDAs with clients. I thought we were going to be doing this one, but just to make it a long story short, I have, for example, a guy here. He's going to be a swordsman. The idea is that he's going to have a few different strikes. One of them is going to be a strike high, a strike low, and a strike mid. Normally, if you want to have him be able to strike 3 different ways, you're stuck with those 3 ways. He's always going to strike towards the ankles. He's always going to strike towards the stomach. He's always going to strike towards the head. With Unity's mechanism, it allows you to take those 3 animations and have them where the high one, the mid one, and the low one can be activated in a percentile way, in amounts, and they can be mixed. Which means if you do one, let's say I attach into mechanism a number for the strike of -1 down here to +1 up here. If I did -0.5, instead of striking all the way down here at his ankles,
Gonna do a mid
you would strike halfway between. It allows you to mix those animations and positions. This could be done for everything. For example, I use this so that I can mix head turns with the character. Mechanism also allows you to override certain bone sections, certain parts of the skeleton, so they take over. A good example. I have a character who is walking around, moving, arms are moving, things like that, and the head has a slight bob. But what I want to do is I also want to have it to where the character looks around from left to right. But I want that to be procedural. And I want it to be able to be overridable by code so that I can have her look left or right or notice something and look in its direction. The way I do that is I make a separate animation that only controls her head and neck and has her look left 90 degrees and right 90 degrees. I attach to that a -90 and a +90 in mechanism, and they're variable things. And that allows her to walk around, have her arms moving, still have the slight bob to her head, but then we're also mixing in how much she turns her head left and right as a new layer on top of it that's only affecting the neck and head bones. Does this make any sense here?
Yeah, you just blend the files together basically, and then call them from action script or variables, right?
Definitely. And it is a very feasible system and allows you to get a lot of beautifully mixed systems. It also, because of the way the animation system's hooked up, it allows you to mix the animations and have fade-ins and fade-outs and transitions between different animation kits. So if we want to have, for example, that head look to the left and right, then just turn off that entire layer at certain times. We can have it to where there's actually a slider in there that we can turn off and up and down either manually or through code, and allows us to turn off an entire layer that way, but ease it down as opposed to snapping it off like a bool. Okay? So that is a lot of what mechanism does. It allows you to blend animations together into layers, and it allows you to transition a lot easier. And it allows you to do it by sending just a few numbers or bools or triggers to mechanism. Mechanism acts as a visual studio for mixing all the different styles of animations and rating how they go in together. I'm actually fairly good with mechanism. If you wanted to do a class on that, I can start walking you through it, and we can do that at some point as well. It's not, I'm not saying it's not hard, but it's well worth it for what it gets you, because before you had to code all of this from scratch. Now
let us get the tank fully animated and everything we want with the tank, and then we can kind of go over more of that.
Well, like I said, that's not a rush. I'm just saying I can offer, and I do have a background on it. But the other thing to remember is you may want to have some background in how mechanism works, because that could change how you choose to animate the tank. You may split up some of the parts of the animation. For example, the track animation that works with the bones that causes it to ripple and such on the tracks might be a whole separate animation from the one that turns the turret. It's 360 degrees. This design choice is what we call a part of the pipeline. The pipeline is anytime you're taking information from an external piece of software to get into Unity. The way Unity can use that information and the method you're going to use it almost always defines not only how you get it in, but how you build it in the first place.
Yeah.
So My statement is always have your pipeline figured out before you start your production line. Do it with one item and be prepared to have to do it over from scratch because it doesn't do what you need.
Yep. Well, I think that's where we're at right now. Is I want to build
Okay.
it the way that we think it should be built, and then maybe after that we can host another meeting. We'll take a look at it and kind of go from there.
Okay. I normally advise getting an idea of the build techniques that have worked in the past and the ones that didn't before doing that. But that's mostly because time is money in those cases. Usually one conversation costs less than rebuilding the tank from beginning to end.
So are you suggesting we have a meeting about Mechanic prior to us starting it?
No, I'm saying before Mechanim, the discussion of what you want that tank to do from beginning to end, how it's going to do every part of it, have that written out in a document effectively. Game design document is for these types of technical things.
Oh. Yeah, we have a wiki that we're creating to kind of highlight these things. It's actually already been created. I don't know if it's public view or not.
Like I said, the key thing with it is the design phase on this is important, and we're talking about potentially a week's worth of work versus an hour meeting.
Yeah.
So due to the factor that as a consultant, I'm normally hired in to tell people money, you have to do it this way because it'll save you money type things. I recommend not just guessing what will work and going in, finding a methodology that does work, and then starting the construction process and tweaking it for your particular needs. So,
okay. So let us put some notes together, and then I'll touch base with you when we kind of figure out what to do from there.
Okay. Let me think here.
The only other thing that I want to make sure that we understood is kind of back to that question about curves, bones, textures, or physics. I don't think we really got a good answer as to like when to use one versus the other.
My advice is almost always use bones. The reason why is because curves don't load into Mechanim on that level, not cleanly. With bones, you have...
If you bake them to a bone, you can.
If you bake them to a bone, yes. But then you're not importing a curve. You're importing a bone that's, effectively following that curve. That's akin to this. If you want cloth physics on a cloak somebody's wearing, you don't try and import the cloth physics. You have the cloth physics. You have a series of bones running down a cloak following the cloth physics. And then you have a model that's going to be a boned model that's going to be following those bones. That's in the final export. So again, it all comes back down to bones. I recommend get used to using bones for almost everything in Unity because it's one of the...
Just touch real quick. What about textures? When, if, or not at all, when would it be okay to use textures? Or are we just...
Could you explain textures? Okay, could you explain what you mean by that? Bones and textures are two totally different items.
Yeah, so like animating the tank with UV textures for the track.
That's an art style decision.
Okay.
I mean, using texture animation to fake motion is a methodology and art decision that, is it simpler? Is it better than using bones? It depends. If you want these items to always stay perfectly rigid, to never shift, if their right angles are sacrosanct, then you have to use texture animation. You're not given anything else, really. The only other option you would have is to alternate two different models of the animation and have it where the two different models, for example, the problem you're dealing with here is the way the tracks are built. Since the tracks are at right angles going up and down, you can't really animate that sliding along. It just doesn't work. So you either do texture animation, you change the way the tracks are built, and just to warn you, I'm getting feedback on the line.
Yeah, I just muted you, Daniel.
Or you're going to need to change out how that's going to animate. For example, the tracks aren't right angle. They're a series of right angle cubes that that are sliding along the track and are at a different angle than the tank. A good example, voxel can be used. Right now, you're doing what I consider hard voxel. That leaves you pretty much only texture animation or alternating model animation, which means it cycles through models that are all perfectly placed with each other, that when you cycle the model, it looks like it's doing something. So you're replacing out the models like sprites.
Yeah.
Texture animation, which is basically changing the position of a texture or how that texture is affecting the object. If you want to have something that looks more like traditional animation, what you do is you make a series of voxel treads, and you have those roll along the surface. And while each one of those treads are voxel, they aren't right angles to each other or the wheels or other pieces. And they slide along it, and they're using a traditional track animation. Which one are you going to use? That's all up to your art design. The art design defines which animation you need to use in this case.
Okay.
So my personal recommendation is going to be, whatever you do, understand you're going to need to do it with all the different pieces. This means that, for example, you might have that jet fighter. You might have secondary animations in the wing and rear flap that are also voxel, but they may change angle and come out of sync with the voxel nature of the plane itself because they're moving parts.
Yeah.
You already have to do that with the tank top. Yeah,
Okay.
the tank turret.
Yep.
So it's not a mortal sin to do it with the treads and other pieces. So I guess the question is going to be, how do you want it to look?
Okay.
My advice is just go with the factor that individual pieces are voxel to themselves, but can change angle and be non-Eleusian with the primary piece.
Yeah, and then use bones to move them.
Yeah.
Would make sense to me.
It's a nice way to do things, and it's clean. Now, with the treads, keep in mind you're dealing with a lot more bones to do it, but funny thing is, you can still fake, to a large degree, the bones on the tread, because if you don't need to have a lot of nuanced motion with it, then you just make two different versions of the tread, one halfway between the other, and instead of using a lot of bones to do it, just have it where it alternates which one it shows. You know what I'm saying?
Say that one more time.
Okay, you have a tread. It's made up of a whole bunch of little blocks. Instead of animating those going around where each one has to have its own individual bone, chewing up a lot of processing power and other things, have all of that track attached to one bone, then make an alternate version of the track that's between the tracks on the other one, halfway turned between two stages, and have it where it alternates between each one of those as it's moving. It could be as simple as changing it between how wide those tracks are from 0 all the way out to 1, and having it where each one alternates which it's doing, and it'll look like it's just going and it'll give you that sort of feeling of animation.
Yeah. Okay. So I understand that. So with the flipping of that, would that all be strictly Blender doing that, to where you hide the track model that's not there?
You would almost always have to do it with bones unless you make it a separate material for the treads.
No, I mean, so if you have two models of the tread itself, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the one that's not being displayed, where does it go? Does it hide up into the model like you were talking about with the jet?
There's a couple of ways to do it. One is to have it to where they shrink to 0 width along the cut section of the tread, and have it where they're all the way back. They're still there. They're still visible, but they've shrunk effectively.
Yeah.
And then have the other one be at full size, and just have it where it alternates those back and forth. If you get it done in one frame every time it happens, and have it where it always snaps between them, using animation, stop motion style animation as opposed to smoothed animation, you can get, it can look pretty good, depending. Keep in mind, you're going to have 100 of these tanks on the screen at one time. None of these tanks are going to need really individual motion per tread.
Could you also alternate the mesh renderer and the component in Unity?
You could, but to do that, you have to have those be separate objects.
Yeah.
And you have to have a material for one set of treads, a separate material for the other set of treads, and then a material for your main battle tank. This means that those two objects are going to triple your rendering cost for this object.
Okay.
So keep in mind when I make suggestions, I'm making it based on real-time strategy, low cost, that sort of thing. But don't hesitate to ask. I'm just saying that I'm trying to take that into consideration with what will give you the visual effect of what you're wanting.
Okay. Well, I think let's go ahead and wrap it up for today,
All right.
and let us do some thinking, and then I can get back to you on what steps we want to take next, or what we may want help with.
All right.
So if I can have everybody go ahead and leave the meeting, other than John and Tessa, that'd be great. And then John, we can talk about how this contractor thing works here.
All right.
All right.
I'm just not going to click anything because that's the only way I know how to get this stuff to work.
Yep.
I don't even know how to stop sharing. There we go.
Tessa, can you stop recording?
Oh, I'll stop as well.